Hello, I'm Joan. I'm a Canadian family physician who also works as a restorative medical educator, facilitator, and coach. I create spaces that rehumanize the work of healthcare. I'm creating this podcast to remind myself, as well as anyone else working in a helping profession, that when you are working and caring for your human patients, you are the other human in the room. Hello there, healthcare humans. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Other Human in the Room. And I am once again the only human in this van. It's so funny. All of my recent solo episodes have been driving episodes. Actually, two of them are unintentional. This one in particular, I had a plan for how this day was going to go, and it was going to include recording a version of this podcast in the comfort of my own home. And then I got a call and went and just visited a patient because I provide palliative care for my patients. And so something came up around that. And so I find myself, my day going differently than planned. And it's so interesting because the topic of this podcast is specifically and deeply relevant to the fact that my plans got changed. And that is the thing I wanted to talk about was dealing with disappointment. And I do mean it in both ways, both dealing with when I feel disappointed and also dealing with other people feeling disappointment in relationship with me. I think I am not alone in finding that this particular emotion quite challenging, maybe even triggering for some people. There's some emotions that are easier for people to tend to, and then there's some that are really tricky, and definitely disappointment is something I've heard from many, whether it's coaching clients or colleagues or patients or friends, that's anything but having someone be disappointed in me, It's almost worse than them being mad at you. There's that cliche of it's often the mother or some parent being like, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. And then that absolutely destroying you if that's what is happening, So can you relate to that? So I wanted to unpack what we're even talking about when we're talking about disappointment and sharing what's been working for me with dealing with disappointment. The original spark of this episode actually came from a time a while ago where I was feeling really a lot of recurring disappointment around a goal I had set. It's a specific dream that I had in relationship actually to this podcast and the coaching business that funds this podcast. And I didn't meet it. And I was working with my somatic therapist, who I love very much, and I've been working with actually for a year now, which is wild. And she works with a couple different techniques, but one is sort of somatic experiencing, which you all would have just heard talking a little bit about somatic experiencing with Olive Von Top on a recent episode. And there was another one too with Dr. Matt Chelu, way back. It's a modality of therapy that you don't have to be a therapist to do, but it's a therapeutic counseling, coaching type technique, which is all about inviting someone to experience their soma, to experience their body, right? If you haven't guessed or heard by now, I have a deep interest in this, so much that I have a whole second podcast called Experiential Anatomy, which doesn't talk about the techniques of somatic experiencing specifically, because that's a certain kind of this. We talk more about just the body in general and experiencing our bodies. But in any case, the ways in which Kristen, my therapist, invites me to experience my body, I have found just a deeply transformative and helpful method. And so I was feeling all of this disappointment about not meeting this goal or fulfilling this dream. And so it's as simple as her asking, so when you're feeling disappointment, what are you actually feeling in your body? Like, what comes up for you? Can you describe it? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Does it have a location in your body? And there's something about actually sitting with and getting curious about and being willing to feel the feeling, which if this is not your first episode, you know I love talking about feeling feelings. So, this method of really like getting curious and experiencing and seeing what comes up and being willing to feel it, it was really interesting because what I realized as I sort of went through that process was when I actually turned inward and felt the emotion of disappointment, disappointment itself did not feel bad, painful, horrible. The thing that had felt like painful and horrible was actually me resisting and feeling shame about feeling disappointment. So when instead I was, in this very comfortable space with this lovely person I trust, was like, tell me what disappointment feels like. And so I was like, okay, so I'm going to like go in. What I found is disappointment really felt like a kind of sadness, which in my formulation it is. It's a kind of sadness. It's saying something's missing that I wish was here, in a certain way. And when I really simply experience sadness versus sadness plus anxiety or sadness plus shame or sadness plus resistance, like for trying to push away my sadness, but simply sadness, it doesn't feel good like in a sparky, pleasury way, but it feels soothing. Like it feels, the word that I keep saying as sort of a different word than saying sadness, which has its own connotations and like inhuman socialized stories, is I say homecoming. Like, and I would invite you, if you feel capable of really seeing if this is true for you or if you feel sadness in a different way. I'm not sure. I don't know that we all really feel these emotions the exact same way. Like we have these word names for sensations in our body. Are we all feeling the same sensations in our body when we say that we feel sad? It's kind of fascinating. For me, it feels like it definitely feels like a slow, it's inviting my body to slow down, but it feels quite warm and it feels like a settling. Like you could say a sinking, but almost more of a settling of my body saying, turn inwards. Something has been lost. I almost picture it like you're bleeding from somewhere. So then it's like my attention resources, the army of me is going to go and shore up my defenses, because any kind of sad emotion, the reason that our body signals that to us is because our bodies think that we've lost something that's important for our survival, right? That's sort of the purpose of sadness. It's like, oh, something's gone that I think I need, or that I have a story that I need. And so I'm going to get quiet. So I always picture like, if I was in the forest and like, the sort of physical nourishment would be like, oh, I thought I had a big bushel of apples and I'm feeling hungry, and oh no, they're all gone. I like, one way I could feel that is sad or disappointed, because it's like, oh, I feel like I needed those apples in order to keep thriving and nourishing my body, and they're not there, right? And more often, really, we feel sadness not in relationship to, oh darn, I'm not able to feed myself, I'm going to starve, but it's usually, oh darn, someone, a person or people that I think I need to feel good about myself, especially to feel that sense of belonging. I think I need to be in connection with them in order to feel safe. When that's gone, then we feel sad. So whether it's that we've lost someone we love, through, either moving away, or if they passed away and we have like that grief bereavement kind of sadness. And it's like, oh, that person brought so much to my life. I was so emotionally and spiritually, maybe physically nourished by their presence. And now they're gone. Will I be okay? Am I okay? Like sadness is sort of like checking with myself. Am I okay? What do I need? Now that this is missing, tending to the holes, the gaps, the deficits, you could say, left behind. But it's like, I say homecoming in the sense of like, it's inviting you to return home. You're not going to be out there with all this energy, expending it on other people and other things. No, it's like, no, I'm shoring up my energy and my resources because I may need them now that I have less of this resource I think I need from this other person or the bushel of apples or whatever, right? So it doesn't feel even necessarily that painful. It depends. Sometimes there can be a pierce of like, ouch, oh, like with disappointment, it's like, ouch, I thought that thing would happen and it didn't. Ouch. There's a gap there. A resource I thought I'd have available to me didn't come through. Shoot, am I okay? So it's like piercing to be like, oh, am I okay? Like that's sort of the message I think of sadness is like, am I okay? But then what it does is if you follow the sadness and you answer that question by following yourself back to yourself and really feeling, you'll learn if you're okay or not. If you're not, hopefully then you can reach out for help and resources from someone else. And if you are okay, you can say, oh yeah, we wish that had come through. We wish that person was still in our lives, or whatever it is we wish, and we are okay. And so we come back home to ourselves and say, oh, we're actually okay. That was like the physical experience I had working through what disappointment even really felt like to me. And it was safe to feel, and it was actually comforting and grounding to follow the emotion in the direction my body was nudging me to follow through that emotion, So I wanted to name, first of all, I wanted to share that experience because it was really quite profound. Because then the next thing I realized then is, okay, so if that's all that disappointment really is, then if someone else is feeling disappointment, all that's happening for them is that exact same process. And, they, like me, may also have shame levels around it, anger, frustration, like anxiety, because they, like me, have been socialized to think that it's not okay to feel disappointment. Something's gone wrong if we felt disappointment in sort of an existential way. That means we're bad or wrong. But beyond that, like, if I have taken actions or taken inactions, and as a result of that, someone feels disappointment towards me, all that's happening in their bodies is a series of sensations. And actually, in particular, I have still a pretty potent worry loop about disappointing my husband. I think because he means so much to me, and probably also like socialization of like husbands and wives. And I don't know, there's probably a bunch of reasons why I have that. And I have found it very helpful. Like even say, I did promise to do something for him and then I forgot, or I didn't, or I prioritized other things. And then he is saying, I am disappointed. That can still be quite triggering and devastating. And one thing that really helps me mitigate that now is like, okay, so what he's telling me is he's feeling the emotion of disappointment in his body. And what I know is that is not actually an evil, harmful, toxic emotion to feel. It is okay for him to feel disappointment. It will not kill him to feel it. I probably don't say any of that out loud because that would be very invalidating for someone at the moment. I've never said that out loud to my husband. I think that would not be an effective way to connect with them through that. But I can say that to myself. Then I don't panic thinking, oh God, it's the same as if I stabbed him in the heart and he's bleeding out, right? It's not. What's happening is his body is inviting him back home to himself to shore up his resources and defenses, in part in response to his expectation that I would do something for him. That is what's happening. That is all what's happening, and we can both survive it. And that's been like really reassuring. And so if you, like me, struggle to feel disappointed in yourself, as well as in some ways for me, I struggle more often to understand that someone else is feeling disappointment and like they have a picture of me in their brain. I wanted to share this as a way to hopefully help neutralize and take down the volume on fears you may have around them. So I wanted to explore then why we have these fears in the first place. Because like, say that's all disappointment is. Disappointment's like, kind of like, oh, my battery drained quicker than I thought because I thought I'd get to a charger and I didn't. Like, in a way, you can almost view it like that. Like, oh, yeah, my battery's lower than expected because I thought I'd get resources, energy, nourishment, purpose from this person doing this task for me. And I haven't. Shoot. Okay. So I've got to pace myself now. If that's what disappointment is, why do we all not we all, but certainly why do I and maybe you feel this really intense like panic or shame or guilt or all these things about someone else's disappointment and even about our own. And so I think one level is that we have this idea, and I've been sold this story that that disappointment shouldn't happen, like that if we have an expectation or a need, that it should always be met. And I think there's something to really separate here. Like, I think it is totally understandable and natural and normal to desire that all expectations and needs are met. That's very useful. Where we get hung up is where we think, the specific way that we have planned in our heads for that person's going to help me meet this expectation, and that person's going to help me that expectation. I'm going to meet my own expectation in this way. When we think that that's never going to fall short or turn out differently, that's an inhuman story, right? So as simple as, like, say I had set a goal for myself to always have my charts closed by the end of the day, right? If I think that I am a bad person, that I am a failure, that this means that I'm doomed and terrible if I don't immediately meet that goal every time, right? That's more than disappointment. That's belief that leads to shame or despair. That is the really painful stuff. It's not the disappointment. The disappointment would be like, oh shoot, I really went for that and I didn't get it. Rats. Like, okay, so if anything, you come home to yourself through the emotion of disappointment and say, I really thought that I was going to get it today. Why didn't I get it? When we don't have the extra layers of like, and this means you're bad, and this means you're hopeless, and it's all this person's fault, and I'm a failure because I didn't do it this time. And we instead say, gosh, I expected the day to go this way, and it didn't quite go that way. And we come home to ourselves and say, am I okay? Yeah, I'm okay. So what could I do differently tomorrow, right? This is literally the process of learning. This is the process of honing a skill. This is a process of learning a new thing. This is a process of living life. Like the more healing human story is, it's a version that's less dismissive of the saying, like, life is full of disappointments. Like, that's often said in a dismissive way and is not necessarily helpful, but like, genuinely, factually, life is full of disappointment because there's plenty of time. Even like, gosh, I hope it's sunny today because you can go to a wedding. Oh, it's raining. Shoot. Like, I think some people try and avoid disappointment by never having a hope or a wish or a dream. And first of all, that's very challenging to do because our brains are always trying to predict what could be best for us. So our brains are always trying to be like, what could be best? Maybe this. I hope this. Like, that's normal, right? And often it really puts you in a very depressive state if you really, do like, I'm just thinking of, which song is it from Wicked? I think it's from I'm Not That Girl, where it's like, don't wish, don't start, because like wishing only, what is it, wounds the heart, right? So like in this case, Elphaba is wishing that Fiora would love her, right? So it's like, don't even wish it, because it'll end up hurt, right? Like that whole idea. It's very challenging to do because the wishes, the desires, whether you set real goals or not, you just naturally form expectations of what you think your day will look like, what you think your life will look like. It just happens, right? And expectation versus reality, it's not actually that common that they match. So thinking that it's not okay if we feel disappointment, or we've done something wrong if we feel disappointment. You could say we've done something wrong only in the sense of, like, if you're going for a goal and you try something and you don't meet it, you could look back and say, okay, what could I do differently next time? But that's not the same as saying that you're wrong as a person, that now you're doomed. Like, all the non-growth mindset, the fixed mindset that we can apply to when we are simply trying to, like, set goals and expectations for ourselves. When we get into that shame-fixed, I'm a terrible person if I don't meet my goals mindset, it's just a hard way to live, because it's not, life is absolutely, and I will say for myself, a life worth living is one where I'm, failing to meet my goals lots of the times because I've set goals that are big. I have dreams that are big. I have dreams for what healthcare could look like. I have dreams for what my life could look like. And they are bigger than I I am currently living now in some ways, they're different than what I look like now. And so if I think that I should never feel the emotion of disappointment, means something's bad, that I'm bad in some way, I'm going to be set up for a life of really like resisting disappointment instead of learning from it. Right. So that is definitely one level of inhuman story. And then when you take it to the interpersonal level, I was really thinking of like, why do we panic so much when someone else feels disappointment in relationship with us, right? And for this one, I found it really helpful, as I often do. I like looked up the word etymology, like what does disappointment mean? Like what does it come from? And according to this word origin website that I always use, the origin comes from a French word, which, because I'm driving, I cannot read to you, but it sounded sort of like disappointment, but French, kind of like despondent. Despondé, I don't think that's it. Anyway, but what it meant was, like, when you think about it, like appointment, disappointment. So what it meant back in the day was to like remove someone from their appointed task, like to cancel or withdraw them from an appointment that you offered to them. Like basically, I think it means like to fire someone from their job. Or that was like the way I was interpreting what they read. And I thought that was actually kind of interesting, right? Because like, it's an interesting way to think of like when we are disappointed with another person, or they are disappointed with us, or even when we're disappointed with ourselves. Like one way to think of it is it's about expectation versus reality, like I said, right? So if someone's disappointed in me, what that means is they had an expectation of how I would act, the tasks I would do, the facial expressions I would make, who knows? But like they expected me to act and take actions in a certain kind of way. You could say they had in their mind, maybe out loud to me, sometimes not though, they had at least in their mind appointed me to a job that would fulfill some need or role in their life, right? And they are disappointed in me when I have not followed through on their expected job that they had for me. And so they're sort of retroactively firing me from that job in the sense that like a concrete one would be like, I expect you to pick up the groceries. I didn't pick up the groceries. So you failed. You did not fulfill the job that I gave you of grocery picker-upper. And so now I'm retroactively saying that you're fired from the job because like you didn't do it. You didn't fulfill that role, right? I just think that's an interesting way to think of it. I don't know. So for me now I'm thinking of like all these different examples of like, a patient, recently I had this patient who is really struggling with a certain specialist, not really paying attention to them and not really offering them helpful treatments. And I was feeling really frustrated and disappointed at the specialist. And so when I started thinking about it in this way of like, right, so in my mind, I'm appointing the specialist the role of like solving this patient's problem. And so that's an example where like, that's a valid expectation, in my opinion. Like it's a valid expectation to wish, hope, and expect a specialist will address the relevant to their specialty problem. And in this case, they have not, right? So sort of what do you do with that next, right? Sort of dealing with disappointment. So if I simply just continue to think this person should do this person should do this, like I basically continue to keep trying to give them the job that they are repeatedly letting me know that like they certainly have fired themselves from it because they're not doing it. They're like, listen, can you stop trying to hire me for this role that I clearly am not going to do, whether I think they should or not? Like if they're not doing the thing I'm expecting it to, and I'm still hoping that someone will fulfill this position. I've tried to make it me, but I can't. I'm a generalist. I'm at the end of what I'm capable of doing. There is a role to be filled, which is like additional medical assessment, tests, and treatment for this person's problem. I can keep trying to give this job to this specialist who is rejecting. They are disappointing themselves, if you will, disappointing themselves from the role I'm trying to give them. Or could I look elsewhere? And in this case, then when I stopped trying to hope that this person would do something different, but still recognize there is a need, there's a role, there are tasks that I really would love someone's help with, and the patient certainly would love someone's help with, then I thought, I asked friends. With her permission, I posted on a Facebook group that we crowdsourced and actually like got her connected to another specialist that I am now hoping, and I may be disappointed, I have no idea, but I am now hoping this next person could address the concerns. I don't know. We'll have to see, right? So there was something about thinking of it as a job, like that when we are disappointed with each other, it's because one of us gave the other a job description that the other person didn't fulfill. It just sort of made it more neutral versus like, oh God, I broke someone's heart, I hurt someone's feelings, which like those, my brain becomes scrambled egg mush and I can't think about it clearly, versus when I can think of it in some way that's a bit more like neutral, and analogies often help me do that, then I can be like, right, so the problem is between us. The need is the need may still be there and I can think it through, right? So when I was thinking about it that way, it kind of made it clearer. So like now, when I'm sensing disappointment in myself towards someone else, I can kind of ask myself some like helpful questions to understand what this disappointment's all about and what do I want to do about it? How do I want to deal with the disappointment, right? So some things I've realized, like I'm disappointed in someone because they didn't, I don't know, pay me a compliment. They didn't pay attention to me. And when I like something like that, right? And then say when I look at it, I can ask myself, it's like, okay, so I tried to give the job of, words of affirmation to said person in my life. And they disappointed themselves. They declined the role of offering words of affirmation to me. So that's kind of what happened. You could say in a more neutral way. Now, one question I can ask is like, first of all, did I verbalize my requests to them? Were they aware that I put them up for this job? Or am I assuming that they're mind readers? Right? So, right, that's one thing to really always ask. It's like, oh, I'm so disappointed, like double checking. What's the chances that this person's even aware that this was an expectation, a request, a job I was hoping they would fulfill for me? And then say I have not, would I like to do that as a next step action to see if it produces the result I was hoping for? The other piece to ask, especially for something like that, where I'm like, I really wanted words of affirmation from that person, which is like a totally valid thing to desire. It's fine. You can want whatever you want. But in this case, asking myself why. Why is it so important that this particular person, parental figure, maybe whoever, says things to me or treats me or is a certain way, and they continue to not be that way? Why is that so important that my body's spending energy producing emotions about it? It's usually because I think like I need that person to offer me this so that I feel okay, that I feel safe, that I feel loved or whatever. And especially in a case where, say, I have even verbalized my desire, my expectation, my request for them to fulfill the job of whatever it is, words of affirmation, calling you once a week, whatever it is. And if they're not following through, even though you have verbalized the request, is it sort of like the example that I just gave with the specialist of like, well, if I'm trying to ask this person to fulfill this job for me and they continue to disappoint themselves from the role that I'm trying to offer to them, should I be looking elsewhere? Why does it have to be this person? And usually if we think it has to be the only way I will feel okay is if this singular person does this singular act for me, there's probably multiple inhuman stories happening. So say it's like parental figure. We have a lot of stories that parents have to act this way and that. And yet when you look at the world, parents act all sorts of ways, right? If we have an inhuman story in our head of like, I can only feel worthy if everyone in my life pays me compliments, that's something to unpack because that is an inhuman story, in my opinion, because you're worthy no matter what, right? And it could be something where it's like, maybe I need to take this work inwards and start to offer myself words of affirmation. Seek out, listen to, and amplify when others offer them to me. Like, should I be looking for different people to fill this role, fulfill this need, right? And so thinking of it as a job in that way really helped. And same with vice versa. So say someone's disappointed in me. Like, so many cases. So the patient says, I'm so disappointed. I thought I would see you, but you had no appointments. And I've used the word appointments in multiple ways. This is going to be confusing. We'll see. But yeah. So the job that patient had for me was, part of your job, Dr. Chan, is to always have appointments at the time I want them. And so now I get to either check with myself, check with my values, check with, my plan and my goals for myself. And if it's true, if it's something, the appointment one wouldn't be the case, but whatever it is, like say someone asked me to do a task and I agree to it and then I forget to do it. Generally, I will also be disappointed in myself in the sense of you know what, when I make a promise, I really do my best to follow through, and I can agree and say, you're right. And I can apologize and say, I said I would pick up the groceries. This one's not a real example, but and I didn't. I'm so sorry. I wish I had remembered. This is, the next time you ask me to do groceries, this is what I'm going to do so that I do remember, whatever. Then you can make amends and then you can move forward. But say in the case of the patient example where the job that they're saying is my job. They're like, this is your job description. This is my job description for you to fulfill the need in me, to be seen whenever I want. I can disappoint myself from that job to say, hey, I hear you that you're saying that that's my job, and I want to let you know I will not fulfill that role. So and they could feel disappointed, that's valid. And all that's happening is that their expectation, their job for me, is not matching what I am wanting, have capacity, sometimes literally have capability doing for them. If someone is disappointed because I have not immediately cured something that takes 6 to 8 weeks to recover typically, that's valid in the sense that they're feeling it in their body, and they think that that one of my jobs is to be a wizard and instantly heal things that take time to heal. And that's a lovely wish, a lovely opinion, a lovely job description that they're offering that I cannot fulfill. And so then what can I do with integrity around that? I can honestly tell them that is not a job I'm able to fill. And I don't necessarily have to think that I'm done something wrong, that I'm bad, etc. And it's okay if they feel disappointed about it. It's okay. I mean, it's okay in the sense it's happening, right? So what are you going to do? I think those are the main things I wanted to say. Also, I've just arrived home. So I would love to know if there's an example or scenario or a way that you struggle with the emotion of disappointment that I haven't covered. I can always do a part 2 if more comes to me. So please reach out if you can think of a way. It's thinking of it as this job analogy is kind of neat, but what about this situation? What about that situation? And in general, the thing I really kind of like is this idea of the person who feels disappointment, really it's the other person who already disappointed. They fired themselves from the role, that expectation, right? So I just think that's kind of neat to flip something on its head, just to give it a new framing. I find doing that really helps to de-electrify the intensity of the old, shamey, anxiety-driven, inhuman story that makes a concept so hard. And so I'm hoping that me talking about disappointment in this way will help neutralize that for you. So the next time you're feeling disappointment or someone else is feeling disappointment, you can ask yourself, what were the expectations here? What were the job descriptions that one of us gave to the other? And what do we want to do about it now, right? So I'm hoping that will be helpful. I'm hoping that will be helpful. And if you share that you are disappointed, I will then please share what was the expectation you had for this podcast, because maybe I will be able to fill it on a future podcast, and maybe it's not possible, in which case I can let you know, but still appreciate you reaching out in case I could do what you wanted. Who knows, right? So there you go, keeping it meta. And with that, I hope everyone has a lovely day and a lovely week, and I'll talk to you next time. I would love to take this work deeper with you. Visit joanchanmd.com today and discover my growing menu of options for restorative medical education to suit your learning needs. I offer one-on-one coaching, customized workshops, and self-study courses that allow you to connect not only with my work on a deeper level, but also with other healthcare humans just like you. So if you want to start humanizing your work in healthcare to a deeper level and do it in community with others, please visit joanchanmd.com and find those options and what fits you and your life today.